So we're so glad that you joined us today on this beautiful spring day. So along with Rose Colasino, Kim Garnett, and Jonathan Rogoff, I welcome you here. I'm Kathy Risberg, and it is just always a great place to be every Saturday with all of you who join us. Most of you already know that we are a multiracial, ethnic, generational coalition pursuing a more diverse, engaged, inclusive electorate by educating voters and advocating policies that directly impact our underserved communities through empowering, supporting, and elevating frontline groups to achieve economic, political, and social justice. It's a big job, and I'm so glad to be part of this whole group trying to get all that done. So here is where you can contact us at iisja@indivisible.com. We are not ill, we're well. You can follow us on Facebook, and you can follow us on Twitter. So we have a monthly meeting structure that I'm sure you're all used to. Our first week of the month is listening, learning, and elevating voices from the front lines. And you can see all the groups that we are working with here. It is pretty amazing how much work there is to do and how many people are out there doing that work. So it's great to come alongside these groups. Our week 2 is our Suppression-Free Democracy Roadmap to 2022, which is where we are right now. Can't tell you how focused we all are in our minds and our hearts on the midterms, and we're glad that you're going to be part of this team to help us get this done and maintain our majorities and get a majority in the Senate. Week 3, our messaging discussion, disinformation at school board meetings, is, along with the other 3, one of my favorites, because I've been inspired to show up at my school board meeting and just to speak. It's really a great thing. It's not difficult. And then week 4, Field Team 6. There is nothing too much that I can say about the work of Field Team 6 and our IL Vote team. They really are helping us get out the votes. And we've got some ways to contribute to the Ukraine Red Cross. We have a link in our notes. And yeah, the war, Russia's war in the Ukraine is always on our hearts. And talk about justice. There is no justice there, but we know that all of the efforts that we're trying to take as individuals and as a country, we hope and pray will make a difference. In our NATO team too. Oh, and this, I'm sorry, this is, in front of us is a picture. And I think if Rose will jump in here, by an artist, we can purchase these, right, Rose?
Yes, absolutely. David Pepper is the artist. You might have heard of him before. We actually hosted him as a speaker. He's tremendous. He's done some great work fighting for democracy. And on the side, as a stress reliever, I wish I could paint. He puts forth these beautiful, beautiful paintings. He also has cups and just different items you can purchase, and the net proceeds do go to the Ukraine Red Cross. So I'm about to launch all the links that Kathy so thoroughly described. I'll present those in the chat, and I'll also provide a link if you want some of this great art. Pardon me, this is actually something from the past. He's done so much more work. So if you get a chance, please do check it out. Thank you.
All right, thanks for the wonderful introductions and setup. We're now going to get into the Suppression-Free Democracy Roadmap, which is why Roadmap 2022, which is why we're here today. As Kathy mentioned, I'm Jonathan Rogoff. I'm one of the co-leaders of this group. And so we know that there's lots of stuff being suppressed. We know that there's lots of stuff being, things that are changing and, legislatively and everywhere else. And so this is just, we need to understand why we're here and what we're doing. And, yeah, so, we managed to win the White House, and we have the House, and we at least have a tie in the Senate. So we have a couple of years of oxygen, yet democracy is hanging by a thread, as we know. And so we certainly have a number of headwinds against, which is what we're going to be talking about. But there's also a bunch of things that are going for us. And so we're just going to kind of lay out the roadmap and understand where we're at and what it's going to take and how we're all going to contribute to making sure that we defy that midterm history for a new president and hold on to both chambers and move and save our democracy, or at least help, keep it moving forward. So we're going to talk about strategies and actions. And as Rose mentioned earlier, we are looking for feedback. Put questions in the chat, please, while we're presenting, or raise your hand if you have a question that you'd like to present, or that on something that I'm talking about at the time. And yeah, and then last thing before I get started is just, as again, I think I'm repeating what Rose said, is we've done this before. We did this for 2018, we did this for 2020. Not saying that we're entirely responsible for the wins in 2018 and 2020, but we like to think that doing this work helps contribute to making that happen and making that continue. So with that, so the first thing we want to talk about is the Poor People's Campaign. And there's, and that's going, a march that's going to be coming up here soon. There's a bunch of stuff going on with some of our other, they're one of our featured partners, and they are working on getting people out from Illinois and from all around the Midwest, taking bus trips out to the campaign. I don't happen to have the dates in front of me. I'm not sure if Rose or Kathy has something has specific information. If not, certainly, oh, yeah, please go ahead, Rose.
Yeah, it is June the 18th, and our colleague Jessica Messenger, who is the leader of Indivisible Metro East, is also working very closely with Poor People's Campaign Illinois to get people on the bus, get them to DC. So there is a lot going on there. I'm going to be putting quite a few links in the chat. If you don't know how to save the chat, there's 3 tiny dots on the lower right-hand corner. So if you are interested in any of this, it'd be great if you're interested in all of it. But if you're interested in some of the actions, pick and choose what works best for you. We do hope you take part. One more thing I want to say about Poor People's Campaign, if I could, Jonathan, is that there are so many good, strong groups, right? We're all doing, we think, such formidable work. There's ourselves, Indivisible, there's also Swing Left, there's a Sister District Project. We felt that there needed to be one overlapping group that brought us all together. And we made the decision, and I hope others follow, that our North Star is Poor People's Campaign, and the Reverend Barber and everyone else at Poor People's Campaign. So we do hope that if you are not familiar with Poor People's Campaign, you do check them out. They are doing tremendous work, and I do feel that they are the voice that will bring all of us together: white, Black, Hispanic, Asian American, so on and so forth. Back to you, Jonathan.
All right, wonderful. Thank you for all that context, Rose. Really, really useful. All right, so now getting into this, we're going to start by looking at the 2022 political climate. First thing is, yeah, it's, we have the racism du jour, whether it's slavery or the Confederacy, Jim Crow, states' rights, Tea Party, or more recently MAGA and the big lie. It's all the same thing, just dressed up in slightly different clothing. We're just, it's all the same sort of thing. There's all sorts of stuff in terms of, it can be hidden by talking, by using terms like plantation rather than talking about that as what it really was, which is a slave labor camp. It can be taught, they turn the Confederacy into a lost cause versus, rather than talking about the, trying to defend slavery and all of that. There's police brutality rather than George Floyd, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just a lot of stuff going on here, and there's also an awful lot of procedural stuff, and we know systemic stuff in terms of just how our laws are written and how our system works, that from the get-go, I mean, even from the original writing of our Constitution, some people had rights and other people had less rights. And despite the high-minded words in the Declaration of Independence and so forth, that's still the more perfect union is something we are still working on achieving and have yet to, and have yet to realize. But so nothing new here, just new flavors for all this stuff. The Trumpism stuff is all just same stuff we've seen before. So we know that we have a lot of very motivated opposition. We, these are somewhat newer things as opposed to just what it always was. So it's what we have now, which is we've got the big lie. We've got all these, what is, I guess, nearly 2,500 bills, that are being tracked, and I guess 573 I'm guessing got passed or whatever. But yeah, it's just crazy. Okay, yeah. So it's just crazy in terms of what's out there and happening in terms of voter access just since 2020. We know we've talked about voter suppression for years. We now have, but anyway, so we know we have the big lie. We know we have attacks on our freedom to vote. We've known about voter suppression for a while. We now have election sabotage that's going on as a bigger picture thing. We're now, with all these new laws and other stuff that's beyond just suppressing the vote, we are now adding all these laws to make it harder for people to vote as well. And where we're not even where some people are not even trusting the outcome of the vote, questioning that, even though we know that 2020 was one of the most thoroughly and validated and best elections we've ever had in terms of security and safety, yet that's not how the messaging from the other side is presenting it. Gerrymandering and obstructionism remain a constant and ever more increasingly concerning problem, as we can see in stuff that's going on in the courts and in what's been happening with the redistricting after the census. It's been wild. We also have the new racist dog whistling, our critical race theory, election fraud, and now again we've got the whole pro-life coming back around, which is really pro-birth, as we know, not necessarily pro-life. The vigilante violence also seems to be something that's sprung up. Well, I'm sure that it was around in prior generations, but certainly in my lifetime, it had been something that was something that I saw in the history books, and that's but now we're seeing that happening at least at these lower level. We've got election officials, public health officials, school board officials, all coming under threats from vigilantes and stuff. So we need to be aware of that. And then, of course, the multi-platform forms of the opposition, be that all the different forms that are listed there. Some of those are here internally, some of those are still propaganda coming from abroad and so forth, but there's on social media. But yeah, there's just a lot of stuff to be aware of on that. I think that's it. So we've got that. We've got that. We also have a bunch of headwinds here. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think we're all aware that people are still very overwhelmed with everything that's been going on. We're still, we want to come out of the pandemic. We're not completely out of the pandemic. We're hopefully ending it. Still not quite on the other side, but any of it anyway. And then everything else that's been coming up, and all the fact that we can't talk to people on the other, and have rational conversations with people on the other side anymore. What climate change is doing to us, et cetera. There's just a lot going on here. And we need to be aware that swing voters are still, they don't see the stark differences the way we see the stark differences. They think that both, they still want to put a pox on both parties. And we need to kind of say, no, there's one that's actually trying to govern and one that is not. And there's also concern about not delivering, which again, as we'll see in the next slide, that's something we need to help get out the word more of what has been delivered and what we are delivering on. And obviously you can't get everything in a day, or even in a year. So it's just reminding everybody it takes steps. So hopefully we're going to start getting people focusing on the elections and out of the disengagement, but that is something we are fighting. And then just looking really big picture and thinking out to 2024, we know that because of the laws that have been passed, Arizona and Georgia are unlikely to remain blue. And so that puts even more concern toward Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania as the linchpins to holding on to the presidency. So now that was the negative stuff. Let's move to some of the positive stuff. I think I've spent enough time on that. We've got a lot of historic accomplishments that Biden had, that has happened under the Biden administration. Certainly the COVID relief, which is one of the first things that got done. Historically, that's a historic stuff in terms of just how much and how quickly we've been able to get people vaccinated. Yet it's still, we need to do more. And now with boosters and stuff, we need to do more, but it's ongoing. But there is still a lot got done. We need to appreciate that, which was certainly not something the prior administration was doing or interested in doing. Similarly, while the prior administration talked about infrastructure and it became a running joke, Biden actually got something historically done as far as infrastructure. And it's not just infrastructure. That should also be read as also being seen as there's a significant environmental impacts toward what's being done on that infrastructure. It is setting the foundation to start to transform us away from some of the, so we're not quite as dependent on fossil fuels and so forth. So we're going to start getting a little bit of green infrastructure stuff put in place as we start digging into the details of some of that. Important to note that is in there. Certainly the economy is at historically low unemployment rates. Wages are finally rising after being stagnant for, seemed like forever. It feels like it was a decade. I don't know if it was quite that long, but it certainly, I don't know that wages rose at all during Trump's years, but they are rising now. 6 million jobs, most in any first year of any presidency, were created. So all really critical things. And then look at what's going on in terms of on the family side of things. We've got very low child poverty. Healthcare was expanded to another, I think, 5 million people nationwide, and nationally hunger has been reduced quite a bit. So all really, really key accomplishments here. Judges have been in the news a lot lately. But certainly Ketanji Brown Jackson, first Black woman on the Supreme Court, is the high profile one everybody knows. But in addition to that, there's just, in general, the most judges at the federal level confirmed in the first year of an administration since Kennedy. So even as much as they were talking about how many judges Trump was appointing, Biden is appointing at a faster rate and getting them through. So we know we've got to deal with these Trump judges for a while, but at least we have another crop coming in behind. And a lot of these are women and people of color and so forth. So a lot better representation on our bench is headed our way in terms of what we're going to start seeing in the next cycle of this stuff. And then along with that diversity line, again, the judges, and then also the most diverse cabinet in history, the most diverse administration in history. Isn't an accomplishment in itself, but it certainly leads to, with more voices and more diversity in the room, there's going to be a better, fewer people are going to be left behind and forgotten when these policies are being discussed and weighed. That is the hope. So with that being the landscape, let me move into our analysis for 2022. So we're looking at specifically our political landscape, the areas that we are kind of focusing on. Got the US House, and especially here in Illinois. I think we're largely staying out of the endorsing for the primary, but certainly, obviously, we know that Representative Underwood and whoever wins that district that Kasten and Newman are running in, these are going to be races that are going to have significant opposition from, are going to be toss-up districts for the general that we're going to need to be focusing a lot on to hold those seats blue. We also know that at the US Senate, there's not, here in Illinois, that's not a direct concern, but certainly next door in Wisconsin, it is, there's a decent potential that we can get Ron Johnson out. Raphael Warnock is going to be on the ballot again, and that, as well as Mark Kelly, as well as some open seats in Pennsylvania and North Carolina that definitely need to be focused on. And depending on how some of this stuff that we're going to get into plays out over the summer, maybe a couple other seats will come into play that are being currently held by Republicans that we can flip, but we will see how that goes. Again, looking at least Midwest, J.B. Pritzker and Tony Evers are definitely seats we need to do everything we can to try and hold blue, especially there in Wisconsin. And if there's anything we can do in Michigan as well on that front, I'm not sure how that one's going. I think that one's going to be, even more of a challenge. But certainly in Wisconsin and in Michigan, the governor is what is holding back a tide of more restrictive laws and other stuff that would be make it that would again, voter suppression, all that type of stuff that would be going on if we don't hold the governor's seat to at least be able to veto some of these very outrageous anti-democratic laws. So we also have locally, again, Illinois State Supreme Court, we know is an issue that is a place that we need to be focusing, especially after what's been going on, what looks like is going to be happening regarding the abortion issue. Illinois did pass a law saying that, back in, I think, 2017, 2018, somewhere in there, to make sure that abortion would remain legal even if the courts overturned it, even if federal courts overturned it. However, if our state Supreme Court flips, and it's right now 4-3 Democratic, if that flips to 4-3 Republican, who knows what's going to happen if that gets challenged in the courts. And we know that it will be if that happens. So the safest way to do it is keep the court Democrats majority, so we don't have to worry about that. And worst comes to worst, we at least have Illinois as a pro-choice state. At the education, there's education we need to be doing, but then there's also a lot of stuff dealing with understanding about election officials and how the election officials are doing and what they're doing, and that what they're doing is transparent and fair and legal. There's also, again, we need to educate people, about and why these are important and why those positions are under threat, and making sure that we don't get some of these big lie people appointed into some of these elected into some of these election official positions. We also need to be aware of judges up and down the ballot, as well as school boards, because these are all places that are coming, under attack that we need to be aware of, and we need to be working on and making sure people are voting for. And then last but not least, definitely not least, the Wisconsin State Assembly, we need to keep an eye on, in that there is a potential, if they flip, I think 4 or 5 seats, then they would have a veto-proof majority. So then they would be able to overrule the governor with legislation, and the governor would lose significant power. So these are all things here locally that we do need to be races that we need to keep an eye on and look into. And if you are not following, not saying that we need to be closely following on a day-to-day basis, but if you are not at least aware of these, put them on your radar, pay attention to them. Now I'm going to get into some messaging stuff. These next few slides are all about messaging. A lot of this stuff comes from, help me, Rose, I'm blanking on, not Shankar Asario. That's the name I was about to, I almost lost. Can't believe I almost lost that.
Yeah,
But,
and if I could just pitch in real quick, it is Anat Shankar Osario and her organization, ASO, and it is a conglomerate of many really great, thorough research organizations. So what we are telling you has been tried and tested.
Right. So this is not just, this is what somebody thinks. This is what actually they've tested, and people are actually saying this is what is seen to be working through various survey mechanisms and so forth of what actually sways people's vote. So the big thing, the overarching message: sell the brownie, not the recipe. Try avoiding the abstractions and the process stuff, and talk more about the outcomes and how this is going to affect people's lives. Define this moment, and emphasize voter agency. And that's why here we're talking, the first stuff we're talking about is what we're talking about in terms of voting and democracy, and obviously talking about protecting our vote, freedom to vote. Those messages are things that people are far more concerned about doing that when you put those messages out there than anything the opposition is saying about preventing voter fraud, or even the stuff that we're saying about trying to defend democracy. Democracy is a term that makes sense for a lot of us. It's very highly motivating and highly concerning, but for the average voter, it's something that feels abstract and feels distant, and it's not something that's immediate to them. But talk about protecting their right to vote. That is immediate to them. So it's just so this is an immediacy thing and an agency thing. Similarly, talking about counting every vote is far more. People care far more about that than they do about claims of a stolen election. When we talk about working together, will of the people, all these unity, different types of messages, that is the way to counter and to get rid, all these concerns about, the various attacks, whether it's dog whistles or straightforward attacks about various other communities. Just keep talking about that. We need to work together. It needs to be the will of the people. It needs to be unity. Those are messages that resonate across the board, and cut through a lot of this other nonsense that is trying to be used to divide us. Similarly, when we're talking about undermining the will of the people, rather than making it about government or refusing to certify, that's process stuff, or the government seems like somebody else. Undermining the will of the people, again, that makes it more immediate about, okay, wait, I chose to do something and it's not that. That gets people's attention. And again, desired outcomes, I mentioned that earlier, rather than dealing with some of the process stuff. So now some other stuff, some things that have been, and we're highlighting, just so people understand why we're highlighting January 6th. It's because there's going to be all this stuff in the next month or two. We're going to be seeing a lot of stuff from that January 6th commission. This is likely to get a lot of headlines in the news, likely to be all over social media. So this is sort of taking a proactive look at how do we engage with that when and as that starts to happen. We want to be shifting the conversation, the narrative from what happened on January 6th and the mob and the rioters and the people in the Viking garb and Confederate flags, or anti-Semitic garb or whatever. All those people, yes, there's stuff going on there, but we want to focus on what were the events leading up to it, how it was a criminal conspiracy that created that. Don't want to necessarily talk about it being an attempted coup, because again, that's getting into language that that sadly a lot of people either don't understand, or they're going to try and get into a technical argument about that it wasn't done by the military, and so therefore it's not technically a coup. Don't even get into all that. Call it a criminal conspiracy. That's something that means something to people. Similarly, criminal conspiracy also resonates more than a big lie, because everybody, most people lie, and a lie is not considered a huge thing, but a criminal conspiracy is something that seems like something big and important. I think I kind of sort of mentioned this a little bit on the last slide, but just again, talk about it being an attack on our country. So that's an attack on us. Not, if it's an attack on the government, it's an attack on the Capitol, that's an attack on somebody else. When you talk about it as an attack on our country, that is an attack on that, that makes it direct to us, and to anyone who cares about this country would view that as an attack on, that an attack they need to be concerned about. We need to address that, so I think I kind of mentioned just a moment ago in terms of the leaders and conspiracy planners versus, talking about them rather than talking about the mob that was actually there on the 6th, and how those leaders and conspiracy planners promoted, paid for, and pardoned the people that did the work on the 1/6, as well as each other, as opposed to talking about how they spread the big lie or other stuff for the reasons that I just mentioned. Last piece on this is we do need to make abortion rights and stuff part of this, part of the messaging here. So there certainly were efforts have been efforts in Ireland and Argentina that have worked, and we can learn from. Compassion and change over choice, and then again cast it in the terms of freedom. Personal freedom, women's freedoms, women's rights, how if they're attacking women's rights today, they're going to attack other community other minority community rights tomorrow, are a lot more compelling than continuing to, I think it sounds like people are starting to feel that this talk about choice has kind of softened the punch of the position here and what we're trying to accomplish. And so we need to make sure that we've got a little more punch in how this is actually about control. And we need to get back to that. Is there anything on this topic that you want to add, Rose?
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. And again, it's not one size fits all. It's just that studies have been done in Ireland and Argentina, and we have learned so much from them. And research has shown us that compassion, change, and care does speak to people more so than choice. People could disagree. It could be different in different areas, but that's what the findings are so far. And I also want to add something that George Lakoff has said. So George Lakoff is the king, right? I think Anachenko Rosario studied under George. He's a professor and has done exhaustive research on this. And I saw a tweet from him and it really spoke to me. And it was about, it's not women's rights, it's freedom. And I put something in the chat about freedom. And I think if we message in the appropriate way, that it can have such an effect. The other side does such an amazing job on messaging. And I think that our side is a little more complex in our messaging because it needs to be in a way. So I'm not docking us, but this information, I just can't express how critical, at least I feel that it is. So thank you, Jonathan, and please proceed.
Well, you're right. And I think to emphasize what Rose just said, the other side is great at caricaturing the situation, all these situations. The reality and the truth is very nuanced and it's very complicated and there is stuff going on. And so it's a harder thing to see and to put yourself in the position of some of these people. And when you see these people, it's fine. But when you're sitting in your own living room, especially somewhere where maybe you're not in an urban area or other stuff, and you just don't see some of this stuff happening on a day-to-day basis, it's very easy to accept the caricatures. And so we need to fight back against those caricatures with reality and with real situations and the real harm that's being done by accepting and adopting those caricatures. All right, so last slide on this. Well, I guess more or less. Certainly phrase, again, how do we phrase and how do we position this? It needs to be about the 1% versus the rest of us, dealing with talks of about the Dems divided, disarray, issues between progressives and moderates, even some of the stuff about moderate centrists, all this type of stuff. When we're talking about the 1% or the corporate politicians and lawmakers or politicians and lawmakers that are owned by the corporations and the 1%, those are things that resonate and that people understand. When we start getting into making it sound like a political squabble between left and right or different wings of the parties, we lose people and people are going to tune out. So it again needs to be about who's fighting for us and who's not fighting for us, and really understanding that. Right now, it looks like Biden's doing a lot in terms of talking about the MAGA Republicans, whether you're talking MAGA Republicans or Trump Republicans. That's probably a better way to phrase things rather than talking about the Trump administration or talking about Republicans or talking about the GOP. Call it out in terms of what it is we're specifically talking about, because otherwise people are going to say, well, not all Republicans or not this or not. It's the Trump Republicans. These are the people that are the concern. These are the people that we need to get out. And these are the people that are on the ballot that we need to make sure do not get elected because they, are going to be concerned about power over people, and that's just not a good thing. So, and again, even some of the stuff that we tend to get into in terms of who are the people, and there's certainly a couple senators that we could name, but we'll avoid but to take my own lesson, we're not going to name those people. We're going to talk about that. It's just again, we've got corporations and billionaires that are telling these politicians what to do. Or in some cases, these politicians are billionaires and run corporations, and so forth. So that's who the real villain is. It's not the politician, not the person themselves. Don't give them additional power by using their name when we don't need to. This last slide, largely, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because it's here and it's included so that if you're looking at this deck, if you want to look at this in the future, it helps explain some of these things that I just said and give you the reason why some of these terms are more important than other terms and why to replace certain terms with other terms. So it's more or less a repeat of the things that I have said, but this is here as a nice, simple reference thing if you're looking at this slide deck after the fact. So now we're going to get into organizing and action steps. And so the big picture, we need to be focusing on massive voter engagement and massive voter registration. Those are the two ways that we do this. And so when we're looking at voter engagement, we need to be doing safe canvassing in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. We need to be doing phone banking with the Wisconsin Dems and the Michigan Dems. We need to be doing vote forward letters and well, a lot of that's again to Wisconsin and Michigan, but there's different campaigns that Vote Forward is doing that are national, different times in different areas for different races. Feel free to dive into that. A lot of what they're doing is great stuff. In your local area, be writing letters to the editor to try and get the word out and present some of these things and get the perspective out there appropriately, and help turn the narrative in the direction that we want to be doing, rather than trying to divide us, that we're trying to unite everybody around what we're trying to do and moving this country forward. Vote by mail is something we definitely want to continue to promote. As it says here, certainly it is clear that in 2020, it definitely did increase participation from low propensity voters and from other stuff. So this gives us more representation. This gives us a broader set of voices, broader coalition, broader, respect that, and ultimately that is what we are looking for, is to make sure all voices are heard. Here in Illinois, make sure you're letting everybody know that we now have a permanent vote by mail option, and we want to be encouraging people to sign up for that permanent vote by mail option. Then they don't have to be worried about every election signing up and getting on the list, or missing out on an election or not knowing about it. There will be a ballot that will show up in their mailbox for every election, primary or general, municipal, excuse me, what have you. That'll be there. And if ballots show up in people's mailboxes, I think they're going to be more likely to go, oh, I need to look at this and fill this out and pay attention. So rather than trying to re-get their attention every cycle, this will really help just encourage and change that situation. The more we can do that and get everybody on that list. It will also help move us more from the model that we're on, which is a decent model, but certainly we think the Colorado model is one that would be nice for us to move toward, where there will still be vote centers, but they won't quite be in the precinct locations, but it will still be for people who want to vote in person on election day. But the goal will be that the majority of people will be able to vote by mail, but people will have those options. And we just want to normalize voting by mail as much as possible. So now switching over to the voter registration side, obviously we've got stuff to do. There's things to do with all these different groups that are named here, as well as I'm sure others. There's stuff to do in your local area. There's stuff to do across Illinois. There's stuff to do in Wisconsin, where certainly we've got a bunch of people in the northern suburbs and north side of Chicago that are driving up and registering voters in Wisconsin all summer long. There's going to be similar efforts. There's efforts to register voters in Michigan. And then certainly there's stuff being done on a national level. Field Team 6 is certainly looking at this from a national perspective. We're partnering with them in terms of the regional stuff, but there's also certainly the, stuff to be done. Plenty of work to be done everywhere. Certainly, again, Georgia and others are going to be big places for it. There's a lot of the stuff that needs to happen as well. Before we get into some very specific actions, then I just want to give a set of reminders to recap some of that stuff. It is the same as it ever was, but that also means we've done this before. We can do this again. The struggle continues. We just keep fighting. It will take a wide coalition of us to win. Sell the brownie, not the recipe. Don't think about just Illinois. We need to be paying attention to our neighbors in Wisconsin and Michigan. And then the American experiment and the 1% are on the ballot in 2022. It really is that boils down to that. Okay, specific actions. And Rose, feel free to jump in for any of these that you want to on this stuff. But obviously, we know we need to, Pritzker has done, wasn't necessarily my first choice for governor, but I've been surprised at the amount of stuff that he's gotten done and the amount of positive changes he's made. And so I think that is something that we need to support. Now, not to say that he has been perfect and not to say that we got everything. Certainly not getting that referendum was definitely a big setback, but there's been a lot done and we do need to keep him in office, as opposed to anything that whether it's a Trump Republican or a moderate, and I think right now we're probably looking at a Trump Republican, but that'll be on the ballot against him. But it's nothing that we want here. Nothing good is going to happen for Illinois if that happens. So we need to make sure that Pritzker gets reelected.
And if I could interject quickly here, Jonathan, we do have links in this deck, so I will be putting that in the chat. So hold on before you leave. And I do want to tell you that as a volunteer, I'm part of the JB Pritzker digital grassroots team. And through social media, we are trying to get the word out. And I agree with everything that Jonathan said. And as a statewide coalition, I'm also a co-lead of Indivisible Illinois. We feel that Governor Pritzker is someone that can bring us all together, suburban, urban, rural, and we most definitely do want him to win again. We feel that he has brought a lot of positivity to the state, and budget's not too shabby either. I think he's, I don't want to say worked miracles, but he has made some headway. Thanks, Jonathan.
Absolutely. Yep. We also have, we know that, Lauren Underwood, she's been there for a while. It would seem that she should be getting stable, but thanks to redistricting, she's once again in a situation where she's now got a whole new crop of voters in her district because of, how that's all changed. So once again, there's a lot of work that's going to happen, that needs to happen on that front. And that definitely, on the opposite side, there is a battle to figure out how low and how Trumpy each candidate, who can be the Trumpiest Trump, in terms of who's going to be opposing her, seems to be the way that opponent battle is shaping up. So it's going to be ugly. I'll let Rose, do you want to talk to this? I know this is your baby.
I would love to. So yes, we have been phone banking for Wisconsin for quite some time. We were canvassing for Wisconsin for quite some time until the pandemic. However, that is happening again, safe canvassing. As far as phone banking, I just want to proudly let you know that we phone bank for Wisconsin from January until present. It is ongoing. They did have an election, I believe it was April 5th, and we're thrilled, excited, over the moon that Cavalier Johnson was elected. He's the first African-American mayor of Milwaukee. And yes, it's Milwaukee, but we feel that that is going to resonate throughout the state. It is progress moving forward. It wasn't easy. We made about 23,000 calls. We had, you don't always find somebody when you call. We had 1,000 conversations. So this phone bank is continuing because we feel that another group, actually the umbrella group of this group, is called Vote by Mail Task Force. We feel that turnout increases with, as they call it in Wisconsin, absentee ballots, and also people of all races have an easier time voting through vote by mail. There's some disagreement on that, but the research does back us up on that. So these phone banks that happen every Saturday continue to happen every Saturday at 4 p.m. They ensure that folks are getting their absentee ballots. If any of you paid attention to what happened in Wisconsin, it's getting more and more convoluted because of the GOP state assembly. So we feel that if we get people starting to get their absentee ballots now, they will have them by November. And I can't tell you how important that is because Wisconsin is a tipping point state. Thanks, Jonathan.
All right, thanks, Rose. Yeah, and just to be clear, so that election on April 5th, that was the municipal election in Wisconsin. That's what we'll be having here, at least in Chicago. We'll be having that in next February, but in Wisconsin, they actually had that on, in the same year. So they've had that, and now they're going to be gearing up for their national primary, and then obviously in November the national general. So they've got a whole bunch of elections going on this year. And they're all important, all up and down the ballot, as I was kind of saying. It's, the battle is at every level and every position. But certainly there were some key wins. I think there were also some important fights in Green Bay and in LeClaire, La Crosse, one of the two. There were also some key wins that happened there, or at least avoided some expected losses that were going to be there. So these fights are winnable. We just need to keep fighting them. So the Sherry Bustos, again, I'm going to let Rose talk to this one.
Yes, and this came from our dear friend, colleague, crusader, Heather, who is here. So pitch in anytime, Heather. She represents a lot of people, but also she represents rural areas. She is from Macomb, Illinois. I don't need to speak for her, I know, but she recommended we had a workshop on this presentation that you are seeing. Many people on the team last Monday, and it was Heather that suggested to us that we concentrate on Illinois 17. Some of you might be familiar with Sherry Boustros, and she actually did get into a little trouble with some of her tactics, but she is moving on, hopefully to help the Democratic Party. And so we are looking for a replacement now on Illinois 17. I don't know,
Yeah,
Heather,
if I
do you
can,
have any favorites in that race?
well,
The primary.
I will tell you, as a Democratic Precinct Committee person, you know, my favorite is always the race, right? I'm supposed to promote all of them, but far and away, the person who has the most credentials and experience is former Rep, the Honorable Dr. Letisa Wallace, who has a doctorate in child psychology. She went to Western for her undergrad as a first-generation college student. And she talked about this and talks about it openly, faced a lot of racism and actually had an issue with her pregnancy and faced the disparity of not having competent people who were culturally informed to treat her when she needed medical assistance. And then she got her master's at NIU, and then her doctorate recently awarded. And, you know, in my mind, sending a doctor, we have great candidates, to be clear. Any one of those candidates would be an excellent person to send to Congress. But the reason why I think that Dr. Wallace is heads and above is because she has been around all these areas where these other candidates primarily have their experience within their own community or their own district, but not necessarily in the region. So the 17th Congressional District actually now encompasses part of what used to be Rep. LaHood's district. So it's been split, and part of LaHood's district, which is extremely red, is now in the 17th Congressional District. And that is why the Republicans think it's winnable. Why? A lot of those county parties, our Dem parties around here, do not have very well functioning Democratic parties to help our people even mount any kind of canvassing. In our county, there's no office for any of our Democratic candidates, and we're the home of Western Illinois University. So, yeah, we need help. Please elevate that race, elevate everybody. You don't need to pick somebody, but wouldn't it be wonderful to send another doctor instead of, say, a lawyer to Congress?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. That is definitely a race that we need to be paying more attention to. All right. So, I
can speak to this,
please.
Jonathan. I added a few things in for Jonathan at the wee hours of last night, or you could say this morning. So this is a toolkit. It's phenomenal. I did not create it. It was created by my friend Sarah Korinsky, and she's on the board at the League. And this is just a taste of it. I am going to, so don't leave. I am going to put the link into the chat. There's so much more to it. As you can see, we have ways to make it easier to vote for folks. We're probably outliers, those of us that are here at noon to 1 o'clock on a Saturday. There's other folks out there that aren't, let's say, paying as close attention to us, and we really need phenomenal participation and turnout across the country to make sure that we retain our democracy. I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but I do believe that this is probably one of the most critical elections of my lifetime, and I'm not that young. So there is information on how to vote. There's also information that speaks to people about healthcare, about reproductive rights, about all the issues that we have heard from other fellow voting citizens that are important to them. So please stay tuned as quickly as my fingers can type. I will put that link in the chat. Please use it and help us spread the word, because it most definitely is going to take all of us and more to get the word out.
All right, great. And yeah, and so now we're going to move into events. And again, these events, I think I'm familiar with most of these, but certainly, yes, these are things that Rose added. So, or Kathy may also have some thoughts or dive into, but, oh, well, and then of course, who better than Jim to talk to this first one? If you'd care to.
I would love to. So next Saturday, a week from today at noon, we will be doing our last meeting on this confronting disinformation at school boards, last meeting for the school year. We're not going to have a meeting in June, but we will resume again in July. So for everybody who is interested in this subject, we would really appreciate you attending. We're going to focus a lot on all these issues with book banning and equity at this next meeting, as well as update some of these other groups that are that we're profiling. One thing that we are making some headway in, some other groups, particularly the Illinois Families for Public Education, now the National Organization for Women, a couple other groups have wanted to form I don't want to call it a coalition, but what we're going to try to set up is just a platform for anybody that attends a school board meeting to attend this. It'll be once a month. And what we're hoping is you can just share what you have done, what your tactics are, what you're seeing, what you're facing, so we can all help each other, rather than just because the meetings that we've been doing with the iisja on the third Saturday has been more of a presentation, and what we're trying to start is more of a dialogue. So this is expanding, which is good news. So everybody's welcome a week from today. Thanks.
Great. And Heather, I see that your hand is up. I just want to quickly try and run through, since we're running low on time, run through these other event announcements, and then we can certainly, for anyone who wants to stick around and have questions, we can certainly do that. So please hold that for just a minute. So we certainly have we also want to announce that we do have an exciting event coming up here on June 28th. The May meeting is, so we've got with a bunch of different speakers and stuff going on. So that'll be May 25th, 7 p.m. to 8:30. So that's, I'm assuming, a Wednesday night. And then here we are. So then just wrap up. We have a quote here from the amazing Fannie Lou Hamer. And so that we have to build our own power. We have to win every single political office we can. All right, with that, I will stop sharing, and then please go ahead with your question, Heather.
I just wanted to bring something to all of your awareness, because we've now confirmed that this is happening in 3 of our counties. It is a shadow book ban. And by that, I mean, what they do is, a lot of our rural schools do not have librarians anymore. They have volunteers. And in a red community, your volunteers tend to be Republicans. And a lot of them tend to be white Christian Republicans, often nationalists, who are anti-LGBTQ. And what we've discovered is those volunteers, they don't want to go after book bans because that draws attention. So they just quietly remove those books that we had donated to try to make the libraries more diverse. And they just kind of remove them from the shelves without anyone even noticing. And if you're not watchdogging that, if you aren't that's one of the things to FOIA every year is your list of books that are there, and then compare it to the previous year, and then take a look and see who's on that volunteer list. And if you've got dedicated white Christian nationalists on there who are anti-LGBTQ, anti-CRT, that'd be one of those things that for people that don't have the stomach to go to school board meetings, sign up to volunteer at the library just to safeguard the school libraries. They need it.
Yeah, Heather, let me add something to that. Something that we just found this last week is, as you probably know, most libraries have an online where you can get, reserve a book online, you can read a book online, etc. So you're talking about shadow banning. What some of these libraries are doing is turning that service off without telling anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, all these books, because somebody said, well, these books are in the library. Well, they're not in the library. They're on these massive, websites that people can download, and they're canceling that, and they can do that in a heartbeat.
I want to point out that it is 1 minute after 1 o'clock, but we do have one more question, at least one more that I saw. If I'm missing any questions, please do let me know. But Marianne, I'm going to let you speak for yourself, but a little higher up in the chat, you had a question comment on pro-life and racism. So let me have you address that. And then after Marianne, that will conclude. We'll have some quick closing remarks that will conclude this meeting, but we will be here for about 10 minutes to debrief. For those of you that want to stick around, we'd love to hear more of your feedback. And if you are interested in staying right after this meeting, we do have our steering committee meeting, and all are welcome to that. And that continues the conversation about this and other things that are on our plate and agenda. Marianne, over to you.
I just wanted to raise the question, just in case I'm not the only person on the planet who never got this before, that pro-life is a racist movement. I didn't understand that. All right, my whole family is pro-life. I'm not. Some of them are probably more racist than most people. I never would have seen a connection. So anyone who can help me to put into words why they should not be unaware of that would be really great.
I'll take a stab at it. And thank you for raising the question, because this is really important to talk about. So if you frame it through the disparities of how traditionally marginalized red line communities suffer disparate health incomes or health impacts already, they don't have access to emergency rooms, to birthing centers. For a white person to say every baby deserves to be born, and while completely ignoring the fact that Black mothers face 4 times the maternal mortality risk in our state, 4 times, right? So that's saying, hey, we know that it's going to kill 4 times as many Black moms as white. That's blatantly racist eugenics right there, right? In plain sight. If you look at who fronts the pro-life movement, it is not Black preachers, because they know that their parishioners struggle hardships, just one too many mouths to feed on, and all the other things that keep them down are at the white racial frame. They don't rise up in their jobs. They don't get access to good jobs. They are kept out of discussions. We don't have any Black folks on our board at our hospital. They just jettisoned out all the OB-GYN midwives and nurse practitioners, and they then hired only very conservative white men now. And so if you go to our hospital and you're a Black mother, you're not going to get anyone but a conservative Republican treating you, probably. And that's probably not going to be someone who even hears that you're in pain. So we have so much disparity, lack of access to even the prenatal vitamins and prenatal care. Black mothers are far more subjected to being unable to afford diapers. Just the lack of diapers alone is one of the #1 risks for postpartum depression. And yet you don't hear the pro-life movement caring about any of that, do you? And the other thing is, point out, ask them to pull up pictures of the last pro-life movement they went to and ask them, where are the Black folks? Right? I mean, that's the other thing. So there's a lot of assumptions that white pro-lifers have. And that's what I get at when I talk to them around here, because I know a lot of these people are otherwise good-hearted people, and they really think it's about just the babies. And from their perspective, in an all-white world where everybody had all the resources and privileges they have, that's what it would be, right? But that's not what it is. It's very different. And to remind them that not everybody lives in our white privilege bubble where we have a nice white doctor who's going to listen to us. So, you know, when abortion becomes illegal, then we know that most class privileged white women will get a family friend who give them a nice private abortion, and they'll call it an appendicitis or, you know, attack. And Black women will get the coat hangers and the motorcycle mechanics who are trying to earn an extra buck, you know, taking care of that. So the disparities of the impact, and along the South, it permanently entrenches poverty in whole communities. It kills mothers. And then when those mothers suffer complications, they're far more likely to be turned into DCFS around here. And if you get a DCFS person investigating you, you're very likely to have a very white, very far right local who grew up around here and has a lot of racial biases. And so then a lot of our Black mothers are accused of wrongdoing. Even the SIDS deaths, this just came out. We now know what causes it. It is a low enzyme in the babies that handles the awakening and causes them to not wake up when they startle or they're too hypoxic. And so the lack of startle response due to the low enzyme level has caused all of these, not all of them, but an awful lot of these SIDS deaths. And yet Black moms are much more likely to end up in prison for that than white moms ever have. You know, the racial disparities, I'll point anyone to the ACLU. There's tons of articles about it on there. They've been fighting this a very long time. The NAACP has excellent. And then, of course, start following some of the Black feminists, you know, you can, Miriam Kuba, they talk about how bringing Black children who already suffer disparate risk into the world that already is unfair to them, that you know they're going to suffer, is in itself not helpful. To say every child should be born but not protected. So there's a lot of that there. And until you face it, until you watch it, you know, happening in front of you, I mean, gosh, just even trying to get people to listen to Black mothers when they're in pain, it's like they're perceived as being angry or violent instead of being in need. And that is tough. Our nursing program here, most of our Black students quit it because the people teaching it were using racist microaggressions at our university. And they reported it several times, but they felt like they couldn't get anywhere, so they left the program. Well, that nursing program feeds most of the rural regional hospitals around here. So what happens with the students left? The students left tend to be very white and are okay with, you know, they didn't have the same problem with the microaggression, right? The whole system itself is functioning as it's designed to do. Adding more disparately treated babies into the system is going to have disparate deaths and harm to marginalized communities.
Great stuff, Heather. I'll also
It was great, Heather. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll also just add really simply, it's like, think of it in terms of the whole marijuana, you know, issue that we've had. White people and Black people use marijuana in the same, you know, in the same frequencies and have the same needs for it. Yet who's in our prisons? You know, it's just because something doesn't appear to be racist, you know, the way our laws and rules get implemented. And as Heather said, white people aren't going to, you know, are still going to get abortions, and they're still going to get abortions at the same rate. The people are going to be affected if you criminalize this. And if you know, if we make this, you know, if we change these laws, are going to disproportionately be people of color.
And locking up moms in prison feeds the prison industrial complex. And that's why the private prison industry is all in for banning abortion.
Yep. There's also some stuff, I don't know how legit this is, that I've seen on floating around on social media talking about, okay, so if you make this, you know, so if all of a sudden you do this, and then that makes it a felony, and then all of a sudden felons can't vote, all of a sudden now you've taken a whole bunch of women, and predominantly women of color, out of the vote, you know, out of the voting pool because they're now felons and now are no longer legally allowed to vote. So I mean, there's also, you know, other things that can happen downstream depending on how those things play out. And it's like, just because somebody had a tragic situation, you now slap these other, you know, these other labels on them, and it just, you know. But yes, that's how the system is designed to work, is to restrict who can vote. goes back to the way the Constitution was written, and the whole 3/5 of a person and white owning land, white landowners and all that type of stuff. So yeah, it's all baked in. Depending on how deep how many layers of that onion you want to peel. But yes. All right.
I want to thank everybody for being here. Any closing comments, Jonathan?
I think given that we are over time, I think we are good to go. Please keep coming back to to this meeting next month, next week. As we continue moving forward, there's more and more, and we'll be continuing to evolve our roadmap. And with that, I think we'll officially end this meeting. And so